Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, the Creativity Explorer, Fredrik Haren, shares with us about how creativity can help you be a better servant leader. Fredrik travels the world, speaking on creativity and innovation, helping individuals and organizations unlock their creative potential. With a unique perspective that blends exploration with expertise, Fredrik challenges conventional thinking and encourages others to embrace curiosity and creativity in all aspects of life. He believes that everyone has the potential to be more creative than they think, and that creativity is essential not just for personal fulfillment, but for solving the world's most pressing problems. Join us as Fredrik gives practical advice on how to become a better servant leader by cultivating a more creative and inspired life. Wow, Fredrik, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All the way from your island.
Yes, all the way from my island.
What a view.
Yeah. That's even better.
Oh, man. I'm so excited for our audience to hear from you. People call you the creative explorer. You're the expert in one of the world's most forward thinkers on creativity. So this is super exciting for our audience to hear from you.
I'm very excited too. It was actually my son that came up with the Creativity Explorer. He was supposed to do his presentation in school. What does your parents do for a living? And he was supposed to say, my father is a creativity expert. But he got it wrong, and he said, my father is a creativity explorer. And I heard that, and I said, this is much better. Because an expert knows everything, but an explorer doesn't know anything, but is curious to find out things. So, yeah, since I heard him say that, he branded me, and I'm very happy for that.
Well, I love that. So
yeah.
How does somebody become a creativity explorer? How do you become in the role that you're in?
Well, actually, I wrote my university thesis about internet and marketing when I was 1994 or 95 or something. So, and it was very early, the early internet days. So I became an instant internet expert. So in the first 5 years, I was writing books and speaking about the internet. But then I kind of transitioned around 2000. I sold my company, and then I transitioned into creativity because I realized that the interesting thing with the internet in the beginning was the fact that it was new. No one knew how to do internet, and no one could say this is how you do the internet, because no one had done the internet. So everyone had to say, well, how could you use this thing, and let's try it out and let's experiment. It was such a wonderful creative time period. And then I said, well, okay, let's just study creativity, regardless if it's with the internet or with AI or with a nonprofit or whatever it might be. Creativity is such a more broader and more interesting topic.
Wow. I mean, so I follow you online, and it looks like you go on some crazy adventures. It looks like you're meeting people around the world, learning about any innovation, creativity, the creative process, all of that. How do you even find these people that you're going and meeting with and learning from?
Different ways, actually. So, well, one way is I do travel a lot. I go to between 15 and 35 countries per year for my speaking assignments. And when I do that, I also meet interesting people. Like, for example, the next speech I'm doing is next week in Denmark. And I just found out they opened a museum of disgusting things in Malmö, right next to Copenhagen. I said, I have to go there. So it's a museum where you can taste really disgusting food from all around the world. And I said, okay, I have to go and interview the guy or woman, I don't know actually, whoever started this. And so I do my speech for KPMG, and then I go to the Museum of Disgusting Things, and I interviewed him, like, how did you get this idea, and why are you launching this? And so I try to find, interesting people who can teach me something about creativity. And then the other way I do it is I just go on research trips to, like, the more unexpected places. I just go because I want to.
I'm sure people pitch you things all the time in terms of, what do you think about this creative idea? How do you know if an idea is good or not?
First of all, I think it's a good question, but I think it's very subjective. So what I think is a good, like, for example, I live on an island. I think that's a brilliant idea. I love living on an island. But some other person will say, well, I'm an introvert. So an extrovert might say, oh my God, how could you have no neighbors, and how can you live, so it's a good idea for me, but it's a terrible idea for someone else. So I think how do you measure if this idea is good or not? You measure it on if it gives you, if it inspires you. That I think if it inspires you, it's a good idea for you. But then That's a totally different thing from will it work? Is it a commercial idea? That's a totally different matter. And the only way to do that is to do research and then to try it out and tweak it and pivot if it doesn't work, and the whole concept of launching ideas, which is something totally different. But for example, when I write books, I never sit down and say, oh, I'm going to write a book that's going to sell. I write a book that I want to write.
Talk to us about your book, because the first book that I came in contact with was a very creative book in hindsight.
Oh, the idea book, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Yes, yeah. So the idea book is, it's, I guess, my most bestseller, my most famous book. But the concept with it is it's a book and a notebook. And so it's a book about creativity, but it's also a notebook for your own ideas. And the reason it's such a good idea is because I can now sell it to companies as stationery. And the stationery budget is much bigger than the book buying budget. And that's why I've sold so many.
So when you're talking to all these people and you've created a bunch of things, when you're talking to people who are creating things or not creating things, I'm sure a lot of people wonder, are they actually creative? Does that come up? And are you trying to convince people that everyone has creativity inside of them, or do they instinctively know it?
No, I am trying to get everyone to think that they could be a little bit more creative than they think they are. So that means that the people who don't think they are creative, which is quite a big group, I want them to get creative confidence. But for the people who do identify as being creative, I want them to become even more creative. I mean, the saddest thing for me is not the uncreative people. The saddest thing for me is the creative people who don't try to become even more creative. It's like the tall basketball player who doesn't practice. That's a shame, isn't it? And the creative person who doesn't try to become even more creative, that is a shame, because imagine what that person could do. So I target both of those groups.
Why do you think people limit themselves on the creativity side?
That's an even better question. There's so many things that kill creativity. I interviewed, what was that? It was one person just a couple of days ago I was interviewing, and it was one drawing in art when she was in 9th grade, and the art teacher gave her a C on one drawing, and she told herself for 20 years, I can't draw, based on that one comment. And now in her 40s, she started drawing again, and now she's going down that avenue again, and now she knows she can draw. So it could be one comment, it could be self-doubt, it could be fear. It's so many things that kill creativity. But I think it's more interesting to ask yourself what encourages your creativity. When have you been the most creative? In what environment is very inducive for your own creativity? For me, it's nature. That's why my office is like a bubble, a glass bubble, so that 360 degrees I see nature, because it inspires my creativity. And I therefore have more ideas. So I think this is, and I should maybe write a whole book about this topic, but to get people to want to become more creative would be the number one thing to make humanity better. I mean, if you really look at it, because creativity is solving problems, right? So if we had people solving more problems, the world would be a better place. But not only that, when we are creative, we become happier. Think about it. When are you the most happy? When is a person the most happy in his whole life or her whole life? Well, when they are in love, right? But what is the second most wonderful feeling a human being can have? That's when we have an idea, that like the best idea of our lives, or when we make an idea happen. Like when we publish a book, it's like, I got my book published. Or when you have this idea, I'm going to do this, I'm going to propose to my wife, or whatever it is. So having a really, really good idea is, no feeling beats it except love. So it's the second most wonderful feeling. Now, why don't we spend more time developing that skill? It eludes me.
So what do people need to do to develop the skill? That's a hard skill, it seems like, to develop.
Well, there's so many things you can do, but this is a good one. My father was a teacher. He was a very creative teacher. He was a music teacher, and he said, because people ask him the same thing: can you teach someone to play an instrument, or are some people just born with it? And he said, you can teach any kid to play an instrument. You put your fingers like this, you blow in this mouth, you blow here, and out comes music. But the only way to make someone a musician is through inspiration. Take a kid And you're Michael Jackson. He saw Fred Astaire, he saw Frank Sinatra, he studied all the greatest, he got inspired by them, he became Michael Jackson. So inspiration is what fuels, everything, but more specifically fuels creativity. So the one thing, if I can only say one thing, you want to develop your creativity, figure out what inspires your creativity and go there.
Wow. So on this podcast, we talk a lot about leadership and servant leadership, and you've got this whole creative piece that you're bringing to the table, and you go around the world speaking to very large audiences, corporate teams, all of that, and teach them creativity. How do you think servant leadership intermingles with creativity, or does it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. I interviewed recently a marketing director of a big professional services firm, and he started marketing director for all of Europe. And he said that his creativity when he was young is totally different from what it is now when he's the CMO. And he called it junior creativity and senior creativity. And junior creativity is like when you're young, you want to prove yourself, you want to have the best idea, you want your idea to win, you want to show that you can do it, you want to come up with this groundbreaking idea. Senior creativity, he said, I don't care anymore. I don't need to have the idea. My goal as a leader is to make sure that the other people, the younger people, that they have the perfect environment to come up with the best ideas. So in that sense, I guess, servant leadership is about making sure that other people are in the right environment and have the right tools to be as creative as they can be. And then you don't have to do anything.
Wow. When it comes to developing the creativity skill, developing this leadership skill, and moving into that higher position, let's say, where you can then inspire others,
right,
what do some steps look like to go from I'm just being inspired myself to then inspiring others?
I think that's a very, very individual aspect. And I think the whole creative process is extremely individual. So you have to understand that your creative process might look very different from mine. So the most important thing you can do is to sit down and write down what's the best idea I've ever had in my life? What is the one of the things that kills creativity? What's the one thing that encouraged my creativity? Well, how do I work in creativity with groups? How do I work with creativity alone? And you write all of this down, like just as much as you can in 15 minutes, as sentences. And take that, put it in ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT to create a manifesto, a creativity manifesto for yourself. And then you read it back to you, and you will have a description of what your creative process looks like and what you should do to harness that as much as possible. That work. 99% of people haven't done this. They have a rough idea about their creative process, but they haven't done this. And it's 15 minutes of your life, and it's the most valuable 15 minutes you could do.
So obviously it takes a little bit of work to start being more creative. Like you said, a lot of times people have heard somebody say something negative, or they get discouraged along the way. How do you build up the courage to just go up and try? I mean, even the conversations you're having with people, the experiences you're doing, do you ever get nervous?
Yes. I mean, as a speaker, yes. I do forced nervousness. I'll take away a slide 5 minutes before the speech starts to make myself nervous, because I don't really know what order they are coming, because I've done 2,000 speeches. You should be nervous when you speak. The worst speeches are when the speaker is not nervous, because nervousness means that you care. And if you're not nervous, you don't care about the speech. So you should be a little bit nervous. Nervous is good. But I'm not nervous when I interview people, because then it's not about me, it's about them. So I'm just extremely curious.
And how does somebody build up the resistance or resilience it takes to be creative? Just the continual trying, even if things don't work out, and not be discouraged to not be creative again.
Good. I have a great story. I was just in the Philippines, and I'm writing a book about how creativity is different in different parts of the world. And I went to the Philippines because the Filipinos are such a happy people. And happiness and creativity is very connected. And I interviewed a bunch of Filipinos, and I said to them, why are you so happy? Like, I know you are happy. My wife is Filipino, so I know the culture. But why is it? And no one could really answer until I interviewed one guy. I think he was a minister of commerce or something. And he said, Well, actually, I've never thought about it, but my grandmother, like, she grew up during the Japanese occupation. It was a terrible time. But when I grew up, she never told me any negative, terrible stories. She only told stories about how they were able to survive during those hard times. And the word here is resilience. And I'm a big fan of etymology. So the word resilience literally means means back, and resilience means bounce. The resilience means bounce back, not just turn up. It means bouncing back. And when I was in the Philippines for the research, I got stuck at 2 a.m. in the morning. I got stuck by a huge flood. Like, the water was this deep, all the cars, hundreds of cars stuck, water coming in through the car at 2 a.m. in the morning until 5 in the morning. And there were 10-year-old kids outside in that water swimming around like it's a swimming pool. And I didn't see a single angry person. Everyone was just having fun, laughing, splashing water on each other. And then a few hours later, okay, water is gone, now let's continue. So resilience, the ability to bounce back from a bad experience, is maybe the most important thing for creativity. And I just saw the Federer speech. Have you seen Federer's speech? Roger Federer held a commencement speech recently. I highly recommend it. And in the speech, he says, I was the best tennis player of my generation. How many matches do you think I won? And I think he won something like 78% or 82% or something. But then he says, how many balls and points did I win? Do you know what the answer is? 54%. He almost lost every other ball. But he said the difference between me and the other players is that I lost the ball and I said, okay, I lost that ball, now on to the next one. That's resilience, the ability to quickly bounce back. So another player will get, I had a match point, I missed it, and then they missed another 2, and then they lose the game, right? Or the set. So the ability, because creativity, you will fail. You will run down dead ends. You will meet rejection after rejection after rejection. But the ability to practice the skill of saying, that's awful, that feels terrible. Now let's go back and, the J.K. Rowling story. Rejected 26 times, right? But say, okay, that was a nasty rejection letter. Let's write another one.
So you talk a lot about this focusing on the global mindset and the importance of the interconnected world. Share with our audience about your thoughts about trying to connect people and embracing different opportunities.
I don't like the word global mindset. I like the word, it's not wrong, but it misses the point. I like human mindset. Because I've been to 75, I've worked in 75 countries. And when you do that and you go to Bangladesh, I've been to North Korea, I've been to South Korea, which is like total America, whatever. And you start meeting people and you start realizing that there are a few things that we have in common. And when you start to realizing what humans have in common, you start to think how humans think. And that broadens your perspective. If you become not multilingual, you become like you can read humanity, and then you start to see human issues, human problems, and then you can go back to your country and live your whole life in your country. But you start to see a solution. You start to think in solutions that's good for humanity. And actually, I think you work a lot with nonprofits, right? And I was actually thinking about that when I read that. As I wrote nonprofit, I said, that is a terrible moniker, because it doesn't describe. It's like saying I'm a non-man if you're a woman. Like, why would you define what you do based on what you are not, right? So I'm thinking, if it shouldn't be for profit or not for profit, it should be for profit or for humanity. We are a for humanity organization. We're not for profit organization. That would focus your mindset much better on what you are actually doing. You're doing this to benefit humanity, not to make money.
Wow. I love that perspective. Even just your ability to think so quickly on the fly to come up with creative concepts like that. I mean, it's taken years for you to get there. Is there hope for the rest of us?
I know I speak fast. I get criticized for that. I apologize.
No, that's so insightful.
No, okay. But let me share with you. I interviewed an artist in Afghanistan just to show that there's no right and wrong here. So I speak fast and I sing fast, but she does traditional Afghan painting. Okay, now they're not allowed to paint at all, but in the olden days, they had a huge culture of dance and music and art. And she paints like they used to do then, which means she will take emeralds and she will ground them down to make a powder, and then she would add water and make a paint. Then she'd go and chop down a tree and make paper. Then she'd go to a cat, cut a hair from the neck and make a brush. And it takes her 6 weeks just to make the material for what she's going to paint. And she said, you just go on Amazon and order. The next day you have everything, you start painting. She said, you don't have time to think about what you're going to paint. And she called that profound patience, which I think is beautiful. So for 6 weeks, she thinks about what she's going to paint while she makes all the materials. So when she finally starts painting, she's already been thinking about it for such a long time, which makes a totally different painting than if you just buy the material and start painting right away. It's totally opposite from the way my brain works, but it's a different creative, it's a different way of being creative, and it's equally beautiful.
That's interesting. I think of when hearing that story, I think of all the things that you hear people say, like fail fast,
Yes.
fail forward, like make it happen quickly. That's such an interesting take.
Exactly.
Do you ever think that sometimes people hear so many influences that are of the same perspective that they forget that there's other perspectives? Does that ever happen when it comes to creativity?
Oh, yes, so I'm Swedish, but I moved to China in 2005, and when I moved to China, I didn't know the culture. I didn't know a single person in China. I had no friends. So for about 3 months, I was alone before I started making my own network. I had no colleagues because I'm an author and a speaker. So in that period, I would go, and I couldn't speak the language. So I go to a restaurant, and I would just point on the menu 3 different dishes, because I knew I couldn't eat one of them, but 2 of them I could eat. And then they would serve me the dish, and then they would give me a fork, a knife, 2 chopsticks, and a Chinese spoon. And they would, because they couldn't speak to me. I couldn't speak to them. So they just gave me everything. And I didn't know how you're supposed to eat that dish. And I didn't. So for the first time in my life, I had to decide, how do I eat this? I don't know what it is. I don't know how you're supposed to eat it. How do I want to eat it? And I realized when I was in Sweden, so many things that I did because that is how you're supposed to be doing them. And that's the same thing with my wife. I am Swedish, she's Filipino. And now when we have kids, we have to say, how do you raise kids? For example, in the Philippines, they hit their children. In Sweden, we don't. I've never been hit as a child. I could never hit my child. So now, are we going to hit them? Are we not going to hit them? Now I need to argue with my wife. What is the benefits of hitting? What's the benefit of not hitting? And in our case, she said, okay, let's try not to hit them and see what happens. And it worked. So we never hit our children. But in the Philippines, they have respect for the elders. And in Sweden, we don't. And I said, wait, that's really nice, actually. So let's take that from the Philippines. And so now we are questioning every aspect of parenting based on, well, this is one way of doing it, but there's another way of doing it. And when you do that, you realize there's so many ways of doing it. And when you realize there are many ways of doing it, that's when you get the human perspective. And then you pick the best one.
Wow. As people get so stuck in their routines or their cultures or whatever it is, I'm even thinking as you're sharing that, my daily life, a lot of times it's on repeat, right? Monday through Friday, you're on repeat. What are small steps that you encourage people to take to break habits or break routines and start being slightly more creative?
Yeah, that is actually, if I'm not wrong, the word experience, from an etymology point of view, experience means there's something that's somehow connected to try. So experience comes from trying things out. So if you do the same thing over and over for 20 years, you don't have 20 years experience. You have 1 year's experience if you've done that for 20 years. So experience trying new things out and experimenting. That's what experience is. So that's why it's so important to try new things. Even doesn't mean you have to travel around the world, but you can go to a trade fair that is not in your industry, right? Don't go to a non-profit trade fair. Go to a plumber convention.
So as you're going through and raising kids, what advice do you have to parents to help them teach their kids the creative process or to become creativity explorers?
Yeah. Well, I gave you one from my father, so let's give you one from my mother now. My mother was also a teacher, And she's the kind of person who knows everything. She was on Jeopardy and she lost in the final, but she knows everything. So when she's been a teacher and she's been a normal teacher and a Montessori teacher. So she's been trained in 2 different ways of being a teacher. So when I got kids late in life, I was 40 years old. I said, I know creativity, Mom, but I don't know children. Teach me something about children that will help me raise creative children. And she said this, and I think this is brilliant because I didn't say it. She said it. She said, whenever the child asks you a question, don't give the answer. Say, what do you think? Because creativity is not about asking questions. Creativity is about finding answers. And every child will ask questions. You don't need to teach a child to ask questions. They do that all the time. But if we always give the answer, we don't teach them the second aspect of creativity, which is to ask the questions and then find the answer. So the kid comes to you and say, Daddy, why is the sky blue? Most parents will say, well, you see, that's because the light reflects blah, blah, blah. Instead you say, what do you think? Now the kid will think about it and say, well, I think the sky is blue because blue is the favorite color of God. Okay, well, that's an interesting answer, but this is what science thinks. And so you still give the answer. You just hold off for 30 seconds. And sometimes the children will have a better answer than you. This actually works on employees too. Whenever the employees come, hey, boss, what are we going to do? You say, what do you think? And you just send them back.
I love that. I was thinking about that both for my kids and for people that I work with, just this concept of challenging them to think through it and understanding where they're coming at it from. There's such learning.
And I actually interviewed another person a couple of days ago, and she took that even further and said, whenever you have whatever problem you have, never make up your mind. Always go out and ask someone else. I have this problem, what would you do? And ask 5 other people what they would do, and then decide what you're going to do. Basically, kind of a second opinion approach to creativity, just to get different new perspectives before you even start thinking yourself.
Wow. So outside of all the speaking you do, and obviously I think you might be starting to write a book, what are you doing now to continue to lead this creativity journey that you're on?
In my case, those 15 lines, put it into ChatGPT. To me, it is travel, go to 15 to 35 countries. Go to Denmark and then go to Mexico and go to the Philippines and whatever. Meet a lot of interesting people, interview them. And I do that for, 6-7 months per year. And then the other half of the year, I sit on an island, totally isolated, sit on a rock and just do podcast and write my books and do my thinking and play with my kids. So because those interviews give me a lot of inspiration, right? That inspires me. But to inspire means to breathe in, right? Inspiration, perspiration. So if you always breathe, if you're constantly inspired, you never create anything. So if I always would be interviewing people, I would never write a book. So I need this other 6 months to just sit and reflect on what I was taught, also what I think I should be writing about, but also writing it. And writing is it's an act of solitude. You need to be by yourself.
How does somebody even start that process? If somebody hears that and they think, boy, if writing is part of it, I'm not a writer. I've never written. I've never even tried this. I've never thought through those questions. What's the first step?
It depends what kind of book you're writing. So I've written fiction and nonfiction. My nonfiction book came to me in a night. It was a nightmare. So I just wrote the nightmare down. So that was that process. And when I did that, I never thought, oh, what should happen now? I just thought, I just closed my eyes and said, what happened next? And then I wrote whatever came into my head. So, and that was an amazing book. But when I do business books, 99% of the work is research. So interviews until you feel like you have such a broad understanding of the subject. And when you do that, the writing goes almost by itself. Having said that, those are my 2 ways of writing books. But I know people, there's a Swedish lawyer who writes 15 minutes on her lunch break every day. She writes 15 minutes. She has a 45-minute lunch break instead of an hour. And for 15 minutes, she writes her book. But she does it every day. I don't write every day. So, find whatever works for you.
Wow. All right, Fredrik, I want to ask you 10 rapid-fire questions.
There we go.
Just say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Who's the first person you think of when I say servant leadership?
Okay, I would say Joe Biden, because he stepped down. I think I'm not a American political person, but to step down like that, I think that's a servant leadership thing to do.
Great. 5 words that most describe yourself.
Okay. Well, explorer will be one of them. Curious would be one of them. Father would be one of them. Should I put that on top? I think. Okay, I'll say island owner, because it includes introvert and nature. And then I will say I will leave the last one blank, because that will change over time depending on what happens. Am I allowed to do that?
I love that answer.
Well,
favorite author or book?
Yeah. Okay, wait. Okay, I really like one book that's called Influence, Science and Practice. I get Giuliani or something like this, because it's so full of it's a book about a psychology professor. It's fire action. Okay, Influence, Science and Practice. It's a great book.
Favorite movie?
I'm a kind of person who really don't have memories of anything. So I'm gonna say I just saw Why Women Kill. It's not a movie. It's a miniseries on Netflix, I think. But Why Women Kill, wonderful dialogue, twists and plot twists and everything.
Favorite food?
Strawberries. My own strawberry.
Do you make your own?
Yeah.
Love it. Favorite thing to do in your free time?
Play with my kids.
All right. Surprising fact about you?
I have a twin brother.
Wow. And actually, a lot of your family is in writing and creativity, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Favorite place you've been?
That is so difficult. But there's so many. I'm gonna say favorite, not favorite. Okay, moving to China. When I moved to China, because that took me from being a Swedish author and speaker to becoming just an author and a speaker. So that changed my worldview.
Where's somewhere that you want to visit that you've never been?
Kazakhstan.
Oh, wow. And finally, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Yeah, I don't have memories. I don't remember. I live in the moment.
I love it. Well, Fredrik, thanks for being open and sharing with our audience. Thanks for being here today. What a privilege.
Hey, I'm very happy we could make it happen.
Likewise. We'll talk soon.
Okay, great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.